To identify your team's internal customers, it's necessary to understand the way in which an organization completes work. Then look at two different approaches a team like yours can take to completing their daily work. One approach is working in silos, and the other is working cross-functionally. Work in organizations is completed by that work moving across the organization in a series of interdependent steps that touch different teams, each with different but needed expertise and skills before the product or service is delivered to the external customer. In this graphic, we can see how Team 1 completes work, then hands off that work to Team 2. Team 2 then uses the work that Team 1 provided to do their job and complete their work, then hands that off to Team 3. Team 3 uses the work that Team 2 provided to complete their job before the product or service is handed off to the external customer. This highlights how Team 2 is dependent upon the work of Team 1, and Team 3 is dependent upon the work of Team 2. Each team or department that touches this work has expertise and skills that are necessary to deliver the product and service to the internal customer, but that other teams lack, and each team touches that work as it moves across the organization. So let's now look at our two approaches to how this type of work can be completed, a siloed work or cross-functional work. In most organizations, teams tend to work in silos or as separate independent teams. They tend to have an inward focus on their own team priorities, concerns, and goals, not a focus on the larger business goals, priorities, and concerns. Now, working this way, they fail to see the interdependence of work as it moves across the organization. They fail to see how the way their team is working has an impact on the ability of other teams to do their daily work. Now, there are three typical consequences of working in silos. Let's look at each of those: rework, firefighting, and conflict and tension. Now, rework occurs when upstream work is done incorrectly and creates downstream problems. Then that downstream work is unable to be completed until this upstream work is done again, this time correctly, before the downstream work can be completed correctly. Firefighting occurs when upstream work is done incorrectly and creates unplanned urgent problems that must be addressed and demand the time and attention away from the team's typical work. And lastly, conflict and tension occurs when upstream work is done incorrectly and adversely impacts another team, and blame and finger pointing results. This is one approach to how teams can work, again, as work moves across the organization from team to team. Some teams work in silos. The other alternative is to work cross-functionally. Working cross-functionally is different than working in silos. As work moves across the organization, this approach coordinates and combines the expertise and work of these different teams, teams with different knowledge, skills, abilities, and priorities, in a manner that delivers the product or service to the external customer. Working cross-functionally enables these different teams, all with a different role, to work as a single united team focused on a common goal. Creating this cross-functional collaborations requires teams work as internal suppliers and internal customers. So let's begin by helping you understand what teams in your organization are your internal customers. Your internal customers are those teams within the organization that are dependent upon your team. They rely on your team to provide or supply them something they need to do their daily work. Your team does work that your internal customer needs to be able to do their job successfully. If they are going to do their job successfully, They need you to do your job successfully. So if they are your internal customer, what does that make you? You are their internal supplier. In your daily work, you supply them something that they need to do their daily work. You are a supplier to them. Now, with this two-way relationship, it is essential that you, as their internal supplier that they rely on, understand the ways in which your daily work impacts the ability of your internal customer to do their daily work. Your daily work is going to either help or hinder them doing their job. Let's look at three simple examples of how different professionals with different but needed expertise work as internal suppliers and internal customers to improve cross-functional collaboration. In this first example, we have a diner that has come into the restaurant to order a meal. Our three players are the external customer or the hungry customer that has come in to get something to eat. Our second player is the server, the internal supplier, and our third player is the cook or the internal customer. So both the server and the cook have expertise and skills that are needed if the external customer, the hungry customer, is to receive the meal that they ordered. However, instead of working in silos, the server and the cook must collaborate cross-functionally. They must work as a single united team by combining and leveraging their expertise. So how does this happen? Once the external customer is seated, the server's expertise is needed. The server helps the external customer select the meal they want. Then the server documents and then submits or supplies that meal order to the cook. In this next step, the cook's expertise of meal preparation is needed. If the cook is to do their job successfully, the server must do their job successfully. If the server provides an order that is what I call an unclean order and is inaccurate, incomplete, untimely, or unclear, then the cook is unable to prepare the meal that the external customer ordered. And you can see how this would cause the three adverse consequences of siloed work: rework, potential crisis and firefighting, or conflict and tension. Let's look at another example of different experts having to collaborate cross-functionally. In our second example, we look at the work of a doctor and nurse and how they must work together to meet the needs of a patient that has come into the clinic. Our three players are the external customer or the sick patient, the doctor, the internal supplier, and the nurse, the internal customer. Both the doctor and the nurse have skills and expertise that are needed if the patient is to receive the necessary treatment. Instead of working in silos, the doctor and the nurse need to collaborate cross-functionally by utilizing and building upon their different but interdependent skills and expertise. They must work together as a single united team focused on the same goal: treating the patient. How does this happen? Well, as the internal supplier, the doctor's expertise is needed first. They assess and diagnose the patient, then prescribe or order the relevant treatment. And they might document this treatment into electronic medical records. And this way, the doctor supplies that order to the nurse, who is the internal customer. And at this point, the nurse needs to use their expertise to administer that treatment to the patient. If the nurse is to do their job successfully, the doctor must do their job successfully. The downstream work of the nurse is dependent upon the upstream work of the physician. If the physician fails to document the treatment accurately, completely, and clearly, if they fail to provide that clean order, the nurse will be unable to provide the treatment, and they will spend valuable time trying to get the information they need from the doctor. Our next example that we will look at is a little more complicated. In this example, complex telecommunications services need to be delivered to an external customer. Who are our three players? Our first player is the external customer or the business that is in need of these telecommunication services. Our second player is the sales team within the telecommunications company. They are the internal supplier. And the third are the order entry team within the telecommunications company. They are the internal customers. Now, all of these groups have expertise that are needed to deliver this complex technical service to the external customer. And if these services are to be delivered correctly the first time and on time, these different groups must collaborate cross-functionally. They must work as a single united team by combining and leveraging each of their expertise and skills. So how is that done? Once the external customer places the order with the sales team then documents and supplies that order, an order containing multiple parts and extensive technical requirements, to the order entry team. The order entry team then uses that information to do their job of entering the various technical requirements into the many relevant systems that are necessary to deliver that service. If the order entry team is to do their job successfully, the document and order supplied by the sales team must be a clean order. It must be complete, accurate, and clear. If it is not a clean order, if it is inaccurate, incomplete, or unclear, it may force the business to return to the external customer and say, "We got it wrong. Can you provide the information again?" This is not only embarrassing for the telecommunications company, it is also costly rework that will delay the order. Now let's complicate this a bit and add a fourth player. We've added a fourth player to this scenario, and that is the technical team. And the technical team takes these technical requirements and does the work to actually create this telecommunications services for the external customer. So let's go look at this situation again. Previously, the order entry team was an internal customer to the sales team. And to do their job, the order entry team then becomes the internal supplier to these various technical teams that fulfill this order. The technical teams become the internal customer of the order entry team. If the order entry team uses the wrong system or enters information that is inaccurate, incomplete, or unclear, these technical experts are unable to do their job. The result will again be more rework that needs to be corrected before they can fulfill this order. So the order entry team moves from being an internal customer to being internal supplier to another internal customer. That is something to keep in mind because everyone is not an internal customer all the time. Every team will move from being an internal customer to one group to being an internal supplier to another group. Back to our initial question, who are your team's internal customers? Well, that question is necessary, but it's insufficient because it's not just about the internal customer. It's about this relationship between internal suppliers and internal customers. So let's start with, who are your team's internal customers? Who are those teams that are dependent upon your team, that rely on your team to supply them something that they need to do their job? The next question is, who are your team's internal suppliers? Who are those teams within your organization that are supplying and providing something that your team needs to do their job successfully? And lastly, what are you doing to ensure your team is collaborating cross-functionally with both your internal suppliers that are supplying you something you need to do your work and your internal customers that rely on your team to do their job successfully? What are you doing to ensure work is not being done in silos, but is being done cross-functionally?